Hi, I'm Steve Casely from CBT Nuggets, and welcome to this nugget. Continuing through the Prince2 themes, this nugget is focused on risk. Risk is the proactive identification of unknown future events that could impact the success of our project, and then taking proactive actions to influence those future events to ensure no adverse impacts take place or impact our project. And risk is one of my favorite components of project management. And the reason that risk is such a favorite component of mine is because with good, effective risk management, we can have the most significant influence on overall project success. If we have good, effective risk management in place, we're going to identify all of the unknown future bad things that can happen on our project and take proactive actions to eliminate them, to transfer them, to avoid them, or simply to minimize the impact that these unknown future bad things are going to have on our project. Or risk, as we'll discuss in just a couple of moments, can also be unknown future good things for our project, and we'll take proactive actions to ensure these unknown future good things happen on our project to improve the success of our project. The other reason I really like doing risk management in training series is, at least in my humble experience, risk is one of the most misunderstood project management components for most newcomers to project management, and therefore I like to go through risk management with a great deal of detail because I find, again, my experience of doing live classrooms and doing one-on-one coaching is risk management is often poorly understood, and because it is such a key to project success, I like to spend the time in training series to ensure that the participants really understand what risk is and how they can effectively do risk management to ensure the continued success of our projects. In this nugget, we're going to cover three main topics. What is risk? What are these unknown future bad or positive events on our project? We'll discuss the risk strategy, because not all projects treat risks equally. Some projects are going to be risk-fearing projects, and we'll build a lot of risk management into them, and other projects are risk-seeking projects, and we'll have minimal risk management in them. So what's the strategy? What's the tolerance for risk in your project? And finally, for the bulk of the nugget, we're going to go through what is risk management. What are the activities that we as project managers should do to be compliant with Prince2 risk management? And when I define what risk is, you can see from what I've laid out, I'm not telling you anything that I haven't already told you. A risk is an unknown future impact, or future event rather, that could impact your project. And risks can be positive, in which case we want them to happen, or they can be negative, in which case we don't want them to happen. Typically, the positive risks we call opportunities, and the negative risks are just simply risks. And the majority of discussions on risk management are focused on the negatives because it seems to be, maybe we're just the eternally most pessimistic race, but I don't think that's necessarily a true statement, but most activities on a project are treated as risks, i.e. the negatives that could adversely impact our project. But when we're doing our Dream and Worry and our other project management and risk management activities, we need to keep an eye and ear open for those positive opportunities that could improve the likelihood of our project success. But what I really want to spend some time on right now is really a little bit further review or understanding of risks. It's an unknown future event that could, there's a degree of uncertainty there, could impact the project. So if we look at that definition just a little bit more, it's an unknown future event. So is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? Do I really have it well defined? Am I guessing? What's the likelihood? And the answer to all of the above is, I don't know. But because there can be future unknown events that could impact our project, we can't turn a blind eye to them. And that's the challenge of risk management, is we're dealing totally in the unknowns. And you've heard me use the term dream and worry, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about dream and worry just in a moment in this particular nugget series. But when we're sitting and thinking about our project, and again, my term is the dream and worry, what's going to happen on our project? What's going to cause my project to be late? What's going to cause my project to go over budget? What's going to cause me project delivery challenges? We're doing risk management. And I don't think it's a stretch to anyone's imagination that as soon as we take on project management and take on the responsibility for delivering a project, we're going to do that dream and worry. Now, we may not do as deliberately and call it dream and worry as I like to describe it, but in quiet times, we're going to say, things are going just too good today. What's going to happen? When is Murphy, if you're aware with Murphy's Law, and Murphy's Law is basically if anything bad is going to happen on my project, or anything bad could happen on my project, it's going to. Risk management is all about heading Murphy off at the pass and ensuring those unknown events don't impact the project. But it's all future, because if it's not future, if it's happening now, it's not a risk, it's an issue. And it's not unknown, it's concrete. You have problems, you're dealing with them. And yes, as project managers, we have to deal with all of those issues and keep our project moving forward to success. But risk management is all about proactivity. Trying to identify these unknown future events that could impact the project and then taking the proactive actions to ensure they're not going to impact the project. But before we truly get into the risk management process, we need to understand what the project risk strategy is going to be. Is this a project that needs to avoid risks at all costs? If there's any chance of anything happening in the future that could cause my project to go late, could cause my project to go over budget, I need to ensure I deal with that now, because I just can't afford to take chances during project delivery. My project absolutely has to be on time, on budget, or whatever the measurement of success is going to be. So that's a project that absolutely needs to avoid risk. And we'll talk about how to do that in just a moment. Or maybe conversely, and we've talked about this already in the nuggets to date, is it could be a project that seeks risks. And my best example of that is an R&D project. Your boss, someone in the business, has come up with a brainy idea that says, if we could do this, our organization is going to be more successful. They have a bit of an idea of what this is, but it's not well laid out. So we're going to take chances. We're going to make mistakes. And hopefully through the process of making those mistakes, we're going to find better activities, better routes to success, and we're going to explore those. But it's really going to be all about, let's start, let's see how far we go, and let's take a branch and let's move forward. And this is a truly risk-seeking project. We may want to do very little, if any, proactive risk management, because if we try to deal with all of those eventualities up front, we may not make the mistakes, we may not find the better routes, and we may not truly achieve the R&D. And a truly risk avoidance project, 100% risk averse, and 100% risk seeking projects are not the norms. Not they exist, but they're not the norms. So typically your project is going to be somewhere plus or minus neutral. I'm a little bit of a risk seeking. Let's say I'm 65% risk seeking, but I'm 35% risk avoidance, or vice versa. And we don't need to get into picking exact percentages, but we're going to find out how far our project strays off the neutral. And really what we're determining is the risk tolerance. How willing are we to fail? And as I say, if we're absolutely 100% unwilling to fail, our risk strategy needs to be built accordingly. Or if we don't really want to fail, but it's an R&D, we're willing to take that chance, then we're going to have the risk seeking. No different. Simply wanted to put another word in front of you. Another term for this is the risk appetite. What's the business's appetite for risk? So you're going to see most likely questions in your Prince 2 exam saying, if the project's risk tolerance is neutral, if the project's risk tolerance is avoidance or aversion, or the risk tolerance is seeking or aggressive, or the equally question may be if the project's risk appetite is avoidance, and so on and so on. So again, just laying these out to make sure you understand what the terms are. So let's just spend another moment or two to deal with this project that's 100% risk avoidance. This project has to be a success. This project has to be implemented in 6 months, or the auditors shut our business down. We've had such a disastrous audit report written on our organization. The auditors have said you have these 6 things to resolve, and if these are not 100% resolved in 6 months, we will have no choice but to shut down your business. Well, that sounds like a pretty avoidance strategy to me. We can't let anything bad happen that's going to simply prevent us from getting all 6 of these things resolved. So how do we do that? Number 1 is we do a lot of dream and worry. We do a very proactive risk identification, and we'll talk about risk identification in just a moment. But we also, in Steve's humble opinion, build in a lot of contingency. So if our project absolutely has to be done in 6 months, I'm not going to develop a project schedule that has 5.8 months of activity built into it. Because if I have a project schedule that's 5.8 months long, that's only given me, and I think you can do the math real fast, 0.2 of a month to deal with bad estimates, to deal with missing work, to deal with any of the other hundreds of thousands of things that's going to go wrong on our project. It's simply too big of a risk. So I'm going to go back to my project schedule and I'm going to say, I just can't even begin the project with a schedule like that, and I'm going to trim the scope. I understand I need to do these 6 things, but is there a bare minimum? Is there an absolute bare minimum of the 6 things? Go back to the auditors, find out, do I have to do each one of these 100%? Or, oh, right, okay, thank you. So 1 through 4, I have a minimum. So I don't have to do 100%, and just for the sake of round figures, I only have to do 50% of the overall audit requirements within the first 6 months, and then I can take another 6 months or whatever the auditors are going to tell me. So I'm going to absolutely trim the scope. Number 5 is mandatory. I have to do 100% of everything that was in number 5, and they say, you know what, 6? That's optional. We need you to do it eventually, but you do not have to have the number 6 done within the 6 months. So with that information in mind, I can go back to my audit items 1 through 4, and I can come up with my new WBS, new task breakdown structure, and say now I can do all of these in 3.5 months, and number 5 is going to take another month. So now I have a 4.5 month schedule, which gives me a month and a half of contingency. I'm going to look at the overall project, I'm going to do my analysis, and I'm going to say, does this give me enough room? Does this give me enough tolerance to believe, to expect, to have very high expectations that I can achieve 4.5 months worth of work in 6 months? And as ridiculous as that may sound, you probably need to get a project that is an absolute drop dead, must be done in 6 months, done. You probably need at least that much, and I would actually be a little more comfortable if I had more than that. So there are ways to build in 100% avoidance, and to me, it's really looking at all of the work that's required and ensuring that anything possible bad that could happen on our project. Now here I focus just on a bad called meeting the schedule, But as we'll talk about in just a few minutes with risk identification, we'll look at every other possible bad thing that could happen on our project and eliminate them up front to allow us to have 100% avoidance strategy. And the other thing I've kind of written all around down here is our risk strategy is ongoing. Risk management is not something we simply do up front at the beginning of our project and never do again. Risk strategy, risk management is daily on our project. We need to keep worrying. We need to keep this dream and worry strategy at the front of our brains at all times. When we're talking to the team, when we're talking to the business, when we're talking to our peers at networking events, when we're surfing the web, we need to always have that ear and eye open for what other bad things or opportunities that could influence my project's success. So knowing what the risk appetite, the risk tolerance for your project is, now it's time to really do risk management. PRINCE2 identifies 5 steps, 5 activities, 5 things that we need to do to be effective risk managers. We need to identify risks. Again, this is Steve's dream and worry. Sit down, put our feet back, find a comfortable meditative state, and think about what future unknown things that could happen on our project that's going to potentially impacts my ability to deliver the project successfully. And when we're identifying, we want to use the traditional brainstorming blue sky strategy that there's no such thing as a bad risk. Let's identify it and then decide whether it's bad or not, and we decide whether it's a realistic risk in the assessing strategy. What's the probability? What's the impact? What's the likelihood of this risk happening? Do I worry about it or do I not? And once we've narrowed the list of no such thing as a bad risk down to the realistic risks, then we develop our risk plan. So how do we deal with this? How do we avoid it? How do we reduce it? How do we transfer it? What is our strategy for dealing with each one of the risk events that we've identified and determined to be realistic? And then we implement them. We put the plans in place. We get money. We get schedule contingency. We get whatever we need from senior management. But we begin to enact and put our risk management plans into action on our project. And finally, we communicate what we're doing with risk management on a regular basis throughout the entire stakeholder community for our project. But let's look at each one of these steps in just a little more detail. So identify, as I've always said all along, this is my dream and worry. At least this is how Steve does it, or this is what Steve describes. I like to find a quiet space. I need to be away from my team because I don't want perpetual distractions of people coming up and talking to me and asking for status and identifying what their next work package is going to be and so on and so on. So I need to find a spot that I can have at least 10 to 15 minutes of uninterrupted time. And Steve's dream and worry is literally he finds a comfortable chair. He leans back. I like to put my feet up. And I typically put my hands behind my head. And as often as I can, without being accused of falling asleep at work, I like to close my eyes to truly block out all of the distractions. And I think about what could go wrong. Do we have learning curve? Do we have performance risks? So identify project or technology risks. I also identify business risks. Is there going to be a competitive challenge? What are our competitors going to do? Is there going to be legislation? Is the government going to come in and tell us that we will need to make adjustments? And I'm going to look at I'm going to say world in general. Are there issues happening in the world that could impact my project? And I like to use weather as an example. If you haven't caught on already by my accent, I'm a Canadian. And yes, it does snow in Canada. It actually snows a fair bit where I live in Canada. So I have a risk called snowstorms. And it is very realistic in my part of the world to lose 3 to 5 days, not contiguous days, it doesn't snow that much, but it's not unrealistic if I have a project that goes through the entire winter months that I would have 3 to 5 days in an average winter where my project team will be storm stayed and unable to get to the office to do the project work. So therefore, I would automatically build a contingency of, I would again probably go on the pessimistic side of 5 days into my project to ensure that I will not miss deadlines, that I have enough contingency or enough slush in there to deal with the fact that the team is going to lose time to storm days. Now, I also did some project management in Los Angeles, and I'm starting to date myself. I got to Los Angeles just after the big Northridge quake. It was about a year or so after. We weren't still in damage repair or anything at that point in time. But people were still talking about the earthquake. Would I build earthquake risk into my project? Probably not. I spent 2 years in LA, and in the 2 years I was in LA, we had minor tremors, but nothing of any significance. There was certainly never any work lost due to earthquakes in that time frame. So therefore, when I'm doing this, I will dream and worry about things that are realistic to happen within my project environment. Are they project risks? Are they business risks? Or are they environment world risks? Snowstorms, earthquakes, global recessions, whatever it's going to be. But I will do my dream and worry. And I'm not the only one who should be dreaming and worrying. I will absolutely involve the business. I may invite them to a specific brainstorming session where I say, we need to brainstorm risks. We need to worry about the things that's going to happen on our project. I will also involve the team. And again, I may invite them to a separate brainstorming session, or I may invite them to the same brainstorming session. Or I may simply send out an email to my business and my team saying, can you take 10 minutes and identify risks and email them back to me? Or whatever communication style is going to be appropriate for your communications, for your project, for your environment. But dreaming and worrying, risk identification is not just the project manager's responsibility. We're going to be the custodian of it, but we need to involve everybody who could possibly come up with ideas that could impact our project. And as I said, there's no such thing as a bad risk. Well, I guess maybe I went a little bit farther than that. In my environment, in eastern Canada, earthquakes are not a known commodity, so I probably wouldn't truly dream and worry about earthquakes. But having put earthquakes in my brain, following my strategy of there's no such thing as a bad risk, I would write earthquake down. And in just a couple of moments, when we slip to our next step, we would quickly discount an earthquake because its probability and an impact is so low. But the key is we really shouldn't be trying to categorize and to analyze the risks in the identification process, because it eliminates that blue sky, that brainstorming approach, and we want to get anything and everything to happen on our project. And we really, at this point, want to worry about only the cause. What is going to go wrong? The simple identification, we will flesh out the details of the event and the details of the effect in just a moment or two. But the focus on the cause is where we want to be with identification. And the next step, as soon as we've got all of the risks identified or risk identified, is we then go into the assessment stage. And this is where we truly determine which risks are bad risks or unrealistic risks and we can quickly ignore, and which ones are realistic risks that we need to worry about. This is where I again very quickly say earthquakes, Eastern Canada, not relevant. Snowstorms, Eastern Canada, very relevant. And we typically do our assessment across two axes. What is the probability? What's the likelihood that this particular risk is going to happen? And what's the impact of the risk happening? If the risk happens, is it going to have a high impact? Or is it going to have an average impact? Or is it going to have a low impact? And we need to determine the rules for determining the probability. Do we do it from a 0 to 100? Do we do it from a 1 to 10? Do we do it on a scale of low, medium, high? Do we do it on a whatever scale? And the answer is any of the above works. But I will give you a couple of guidelines. To try to do your probability and your impact on a scale as detailed as 0 to 100, I think is far too granular, far too specific, because we're dealing with unknown future events. So how can I sit here and say there is a 78% probability of a learning curve, or an 85% probability of a snowstorm, or a 22% probability of a competitive challenge? I can make the numbers up, but I don't think I have any basis on trying to put them to the degree of granularity from a 0 to 100. So let's look at the next one. From 1 to 10. What's the probability on a scale of 1 to 10 of earthquakes in Nova Scotia, of snowstorms in Nova Scotia? That's where I live in eastern Canada, is the province of Nova Scotia. What's the probability of a competitive challenge on a scale to 1 to 10? Certainly getting a little bit better. We can pick a 7 versus an 8, and people are going to probably say, yeah, you're probably right. But I would suggest even a scale of 1 to 10, I think, and this is truly a Steve personal assessment, there are no rules, that even going as high as 1 to 10 is probably too granular. I personally prefer to go, my absolute preference is a scale from 1 to 3. And a 1 to 3 absolutely equates with the letters below is a low, medium, high. But a lot of my business people say that's just too wishy-washy. It's a low, it's a medium, it's a high. I want a little bit more granularity, so we often will settle on a scale of 1 to 5, which is what I'll show you in just a moment. And knowing that we've determined what our probability scale is going to be, what our impact scale is going to be, typically we will put that into some kind of an assessment grid. And I know I've shared a grid like this with you already in the Nugget series. And we will begin to plot our risks. So snowstorm in Nova Scotia, the impact is actually pretty low. This is a 10-month project. I'm going to lose 3 to 5 days, so my impact is going to be way down here in the 1 to 2 range. But what's the probability? I said Nova Scotia, it's going to snow. Only 3 of the 10 months are in the winter. But yes, I'm going to get some snow, so I'm going to say, here's my snowstorm risk right about here. And I would do that for all of my risks. But before I truly start plotting the risks, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my risk tolerance onto the grid. So if this is a risk-averse project, I'm going to put my tolerance way down here. The only risk that I'm going to ignore is these very, very low probability, low impact risks, and everything else I'm going to worry about. Or if this is a risk-seeking project, it's going to be only these at the extreme probability and the very, very high impact I'm going to worry about. Or if this is a risk, a 65% project, it's going to, follow something like that. So everything on this side of my tolerance, I'm going to worry about, and everything below, I'm going to ignore. And that is the most common way we do for assessing to do the realistic, to determine which risks I'm going to worry about and which risks I'm going to ignore. The other thing we need to be concerned about when we're doing assessment is the proximity. How close in time are these risks? And I'll typically do that with some kind of a radar scope. Looks like a bullseye, same idea, but here is the now. These are the risks that's going to happen in the next 30 days. Here are the risks that's going to happen soon in the next 60 to 90 days, or actually 30 to 90 days, because I'm going to worry about the 0 to 30s in here. And here are the 90s to 200s. And here's the 200 plus days. Doesn't impact their probability and impact determination, but it absolutely determines when I'm going to take action. And we should only be taking action on the risks that are at the center of my radar, the nows, the 0 to 30s, and spending some focus on the ones that are going to soon, the 30 to 90 day risks. I'm going to begin to start to put actions in place, but the 90 to 200 day risks I'm going to be aware of, and the 200 plus day risks I'm going to say, yep, they're going to happen at some point in time. I will eventually move them in on my radar scope, but I'm not going to worry about them now. And the reason we're doing all of this is to get rid of these bad risks, the unrealistic risks, and to focus on the risks that we absolutely need to worry about now. And we did the assessing so that we will only plan the true risks. The risks that are within our project's concern, that meet our tolerance criteria, that satisfy our appetite for risk, if you want to look at it that way. And we have 4 strategies for dealing with risks. We can avoid the risk. So there is a risk of learning curve. If we take an avoidance strategy, we don't worry about learning curve. We send the team to training now, before the potential for the learning curve even happen, before the team even writes the very first line of code. We send them out for training now, and we ensure that they have adequate training to prevent the learning curve from ever happening. So as soon as we take an avoidance strategy, we immediately change the work breakdown structure, because we've added in new tasks, new work packages that's called attend technical training. And we changed the budget because we've had to add in the dollars to pay for the training. Avoidance is changing the approach to ensure the risk has no possibility of happening, or very limited possibility of happening. Obviously in life there are no certainties. Or we take a reduction strategy. We're concerned that there's going to be a learning curve, and to reduce it, we're going to talk to HR, and we're going to ensure that 50% of our team is experienced. So by ensuring that 50% of our team is experienced, that 50% of the team will not have the learning curve, and therefore we're only concerned with the learning curve for the remaining 50%, and we may decide that's a risk we're willing to take. We've now changed the probability. We've now changed the likelihood of that risk occurring, and we've dropped it down by a significant factor. So in fact, we would have truly moved it in our grid and moved it to the point that we're willing to accept it. Or maybe we want to take a transference strategy. We're going to hire a consultant. Somebody who understands this. They're not a member of our team, but we're going to transfer the risk of this learning curve, of this new technology, and we're going to simply hire a consultant on a fixed price contract to write the code in that new language. And by transference, we've moved all of the risk off of our project and onto this fixed price consultant. Transference is not a bad thing. Transference is like buying an insurance policy. We all insure our homes. We all insure our automobiles against the risk of damage. Transference is no different than taking out an insurance policy, where our insurance policy is hiring of the consultant and building it into the project. So in this case, reduction, we worked with HR. We've again changed the WBS because we've assigned different team members to our project. It may or may not change our dollars because these experienced resources may cost a little more. Transference, we've absolutely changed the WBS. In fact, we've reduced the WBS because we've taken out a significant amount of the WBS and sent it off on a fixed price approach to our consultant. And again, we've changed our dollars. Our final risk strategy is accept. It's going to snow in Nova Scotia. As soon as we say accept, we should build in contingency. We're not truly changing the WBS. We're simply building in contingency that we're deferring milestones in winter by 5 days so that I don't know when the snowstorm's going to happen. It could be in January, it could be in February, it could be in March. But sometime in those months, I'm going to have 1 or 2 storms or 3 storms that's going to impact my team's ability to deliver, and therefore I'm simply going to defer my milestones. So I've changed the WBS by changing the milestones. I haven't truly changed the budget, and I have built in the contingency. So depending on your risk avoidance, risk reduction, risk transference, risk acceptance strategy, you will take different actions, but the key is to identify the actions and ensure you adjust your project approach to deal with those actions. And we also need to think about the opportunities. The good things that's going to improve our project. The strategies for doing that is a sharing strategy. We're going to exploit them. We're going to take advantage of them. We're going to enhance them, or we're simply going to reject them. And they don't line up one for one, but these are the equivalent types of strategies that we could use if we're dealing with opportunities. So again, don't forget that opportunities exist, but as a rule, we don't spend a lot of time on projects to ensure to work with opportunities. We seem to be more on the negative sense, and most literature and most discussions, and I would expect most questions in your Prince 2 exam are going to be on the risk side, but be aware of what the strategies for the opportunities as well, because there may be one random question come at you related to sharing, exploiting, enhancing, or rejecting. And I think you can probably understand what the strategies would be for each of those based on the words, and be prepared for potential questions and opportunities, but expect the majority of the questions on your exam will be on the risk side of the fence. And that's it for the proactive. That's for the planning part of risk management. Implementation, or implement, is what happens when the risk takes place. When the risk actually happens. So we had a risk strategy for reducing, or we had a risk strategy for accepting. Nova Scotia snowstorm. We had contingency of 3 days. So we take the action, we let the team know there's supposed to be a nasty snowstorm coming tomorrow. It's highly unlikely you're going to make it to work, but don't worry about it. I've built in contingency, and we will still be able to meet our milestones on time. So we take the action. Or a specific strategy on the learning curve that I didn't specifically call out, but let's assume that we decided to take an accept strategy for the learning curve, and the accept strategy was, and if it truly happens, then I will hire a guru, not to write the code, but to look over the shoulder and advise. So again, if we were concerned about learning curve, we decided we were going to accept it, but we were going to put an action plan in place. Should the learning curve happens, we're going to find a local guru, and we're going to bring the guru in for on-the-job training. On-the-job training to simply say, look over the shoulder. That's what we're going to do when the risk takes place. We're going to take whatever the action identified in the risk plan, and we're going to put it into play. Or, as I said, in the case of the snowstorms, we're going to use the contingency. We're going to tell the team it's okay, we've relaxed the milestone. Or we're going to use the contingency of the $5,000 to hire the guru. Or we had a contingency of bringing in $15,000 for an advanced server to deal with the slow compile times, or whatever it is that our risk plan identified that we had set aside. whether it is plans, whether it is time, whether it is funds, but we're going to use the contingency and we're going to put our actions in place. And the reason this is so important is when the risk happens, the first reaction is panic. Oh no, we have a project delivery problem and it's going to impact our project success. What are we going to do? And if we're in a panic mode, if we're in a reactive mode, we're not going to be thinking clearly. At least I don't always think clearly when I'm in a panic reactive mode. But the beauty of risk management is we're not in panic, we're not in reactive. Risk happens. We say, gosh darn it, I really didn't want that risk to happen. But you know what? I have a proactive strategy. I have the phone number for the guru, and I'm dialing. I don't have to go searching for, I don't have to come up with different strategies. In the calm and quiet of planning, I developed my proactive action. I did my gosh darn it. The risk happened, the learning curve happened. But I instantly start dialing the phone, and I have my guru on the job, doing the on-job training, the on-job support the next day, and my risk is dealt with. It's not panic, it's not reactive, it's proactive, and we put into play the action. And I have the time and I have the money to allow it to happen. The last aspect to risk management is the opposite of the gosh darn it. This is the yay. I had a concern that there was going to be a learning curve. But you know what? It didn't happen. I'm now 2/3 of the way through all of the development in this new programming language. The team is completing every task on schedule. And the learning curve didn't happen. Yay! Good news. So I simply released the risk. I stopped worrying. Once the trigger event for the risk has come and gone, we say yay, we release the risk, we release the contingency, and we continue to deliver our project successfully. And our last risk management step is simply to communicate. We communicate on our status report. What's in the bullseye? What are the risks that are front and center? What's the likelihood? What am I doing about it? What are my actions? What's my contingency? But we do full, open, and honest communications of everything that's happening on our project, including the things that we're worrying about, and we do full, open, and honest communications of our risk budget. I had a contingency of $50,000. $5,000 was reserved for learning curve. It's been released. I now have an extra $5,000 free for future risks as a result of the learning curve not happening. Or conversely, I had a contingency of $5,000. I had $15,000 set aside for the new server, and I had to spend it. But we do full, open, honest communications of what we're doing to manage our risks, and we do full, open, and honest communications of our risk budget. And just to close out this nugget, I want to very, very quickly review when and where do we do risk management. And as I said, we do risk management daily. It is an ongoing, continuous activity that has to be baked into our project and baked into our project management approach. But I quickly want to call out where there are specific risk management steps built into the Prince2 processes. And I'm going to go through this very quickly because we've already reviewed all of the processes in detail earlier in the Nugget series. But again, just to emphasize that risk management is an ongoing, continuous activity. We start risk management in SU. This is your test. Do you remember what all the acronyms stand for? SU is start up the project, and we do it when we assemble the project brief. And I'm going to present this in more or less a chronological order. We retouch on risk management in DP, in directing the project, where senior management are going to review and understand the risks before they're going to authorize the initiation of the project. We retouch risk management in IP, initiating a project, when we create the all-important risk register. We're going to do a little more risk management in IP, where we refine the business case, and based on the new improved information we now know about the project, what new risks have we identified? And management is going to do a touch base with the risks again back in DP, directing a project before they authorize the project based on the information we presented to them in the business case. And we're going to really do it again in SB, managing the stage boundary, where we manage the stage boundary and again review and validate our risk register and update our risk register as a result of any new information we have from creating the new plan for the next stage. And we're going to present that back to management again in DP, directing a project, when they authorize the stage or the exception plan. So this is the overall brief of the risk management process. But there's more. Wait. I feel like I'm that guy on TV in the info commercial on selling Ginsu knives. Wait, there's more. For another $2.95, I'll give you more instances of where we do risk management. During the actual delivery of the project, again, we have ongoing risk management with the team. Every time we do authorize a work package in controlling a stage, we need to ensure that the team members understand what the risks in that package is going to be. And we want the team member to also recognize and accept the risks when they're accepting the work package in MP, in managing the product delivery. And we very explicitly call out the capture and examination of the risks again in CS, controlling the stage. And when we review the stage status, we're going to review the risk register. We're going to carry it forward in CS. And most specifically, we're going to escalate the issues and the risks in CS to ensure that the team, that management, that our project board is aware of risk management. So risk is continuous. Risk is daily. But with good effective risk management in place on our project, we're going to proactively eliminate those future unknown bad things, and we're going to keep our project on the straight and narrow and successfully delivery. This concludes our nugget on the risk theme. In this nugget, we talked about what is a risk. It's an unknown future event that could impact the project's success. It could be a risk and have a negative impact, or it could be an opportunity and have a positive impact. Recognizing that these unknown future events can impact our project success, we need to develop the risk strategy. What is our risk tolerance? Is this a risk avoiding project? Or is this a risk seeking project? Are we somewhere in the middle with a neutral approach? Depending on our strategy for risk tolerance, we will develop and understand which risks need to be worked on and which risks can be avoided. And we do that through our risk management approach, where our risk management approach defines, identify the risks, do the dream and worry, we assess, we determine which risks are realistic based on our tolerance, we develop the plan, what are the proactive actions that we can take to avoid, to transfer, to reduce, or accept the risk. We then implement the risk activity, the risk plan, when the risk event happens. And finally, we communicate the results of our risk management to our project board through our project status reports. This concludes our nugget on the Prince2 risk theme. I hope this module has been informative for you, and thank you very much for viewing.